Now we have been talking about the Samma Ditti Sutra, and in this Samma Ditti Sutra we are mainly talking about what is called the Paticca Samuppada, the antecedental concurrence. Now, this is a series of antecedents that we were talking about. Now, we have two questions here. In summary is right view, the understanding of how I is created. Yes, this right view is mainly that, how the idea of I is created. And then what can you explain further about tense? Are the three tense the beginning of to suffering? Yeah. What is translated as tense is what I call influence. Yeah. Upadana. Kama upadana, bhava upadana, and avidya upadana. Kama is sensual desire for sensual pleasures. Bhava is existence or being. And avidya is usually translated as ignorance. Yes. These are the what you call the tense. So I told you that these are, although it's called tense, it is really how these things are coming from outside. That is why it's called an influence, flowing in. Whereas these are also mentioned by Sigmund Freud, called it the instinct. There the instinct means it is coming from inside and going out seeking an outlet. Here the Buddha is pointing out that it is coming from outside in. There is the difference. That is the meaning of the word influence, flowing in. The important thing is that it looks like you are still not understanding the Paticca Samuppada properly. So this is why it is necessary to read this sutra, which I ask you to read it at home. And last time we were talking about it from the other end, that is, starting from dukkha and finding the cause of dukkha. Dukkha is normally translated as suffering, which I call the insecurity of life. The insecurity of life means we have to understand that life, what we call life, is a struggle to exist. That is how Charles Darwin saw it, as a struggle for existence. Because from the time you are born into this world, even without your knowing about it, you are struggling to exist. Why? You have to start with breathing. If you don't breathe, you die. So breathing itself is a struggle to exist. And it's not only breathing, then taking food. Taking food doesn't mean that it is eating. At the beginning, it is not even eating, it is drinking. So, there is also a struggle to exist. And then, of course, the temperature is also important. If it is too cold, you die. If it is too hot, you die. So it's always a struggle to exist. And from the time you are born, you are struggling to exist. And but the problem is, we are struggling to exist in an environment. We have a body, and the body is in an environment. What is outside the body is the environment. And this environment is hostile to the struggle to exist. It's not helping you to exist. Now, if you look at the animal world, an animal may be going in search of food, and that is to exist. And while going in search of food, that animal can become the food of another animal. So, in other words, existence is not encouraged by the environment. So, apart from nature itself, nature is not helping in the existence. So it is really an impossible struggle. The struggle to exist is trying to do the impossible. But why is this struggle to exist? Now, this is the problem. This is not done by a conscious being. It is just happening due to the presence of the necessary conditions. So that means no one is really trying to do this. It is simply happening due to the presence of the necessary conditions. Now, there is no thinking going on in this. It is only this evolutionary process that is going on, biological evolution. And this evolutionary process gradually creates the plants, the animals, and the animals keep on evolving till a human being comes into being. And it is when the human being comes into being that thinking is going on. It is the human being that can think and understand what is going on. But that thinking human being is still dominated by the blind emotions. Emotions cannot think. Emotions are blind. Emotions come in the form of desires, hatreds, fears, worries. That is what emotion is. And it is this emotion that wants to keep on existing. And the thinking part of the human being is trying to gratify the emotions. The thinking part wants to do what emotions want. But the emotions are blind and want to go against reality. What is the reality? That everything is dependent on conditions. That is the reality. And what is dependent on conditions is unstable. It comes and goes, comes and goes. Unstable. The instability is what is called anicca. Anicca is the instability. just like a piece of ice. It is dependent on the temperature. When the temperature rises, the ice becomes water. And if you heat the water, water becomes water vapor. So in a similar way, the body, every cell in the body is made of cells, and every cell remains only for a short while, it breaks down, and new cells are being formed. So there is nothing that remains forever. Everything is breaking down. So this continuation of the struggle to survive, that is what is creating the evolution. Evolution is a result of the struggle to exist. But when the human being is evolved, it is the human being who can understand that this evolution and the struggle to survive, the struggle to exist, is a futile struggle. Because every plant, every animal, every human being has to die. So that existence is not possible. Although there is the struggle to exist. So what exists is simply not the individual, but the species. A generation. And that continuation of a generation is because of what is called reproduction. You begin to produce children, and those children, they grow old and die. And before they die, again they produce more children. So like that it goes on, but no individual can continue. Only a generation is continuing. So this continuing of the generation is simply the continuing of suffering. What continues is ultimately suffering only. That is the important thing to understand. But why we continue this is simply again because of emotions. That emotion is what is called tanha, which is today translated as craving. It is not just a craving, it is the emotional impulse It is the emotional impulse. That cannot think. The emotion cannot think. So what the Buddha points out is that we as human beings can use the thinking part to stop this emotional struggle to survive. And that is the only way that this suffering can come to an end. But there again, the suffering, we are only thinking of the suffering of the individual. But still, there is no complete stopping of all suffering. Each individual has to get the thinking part to dominate the mind. It is the thinking part that can stop the emotional part, which is going against reality. It is the emotional part that is going against reality. And that emotional part is called chitta. And the thinking part is called mano. So it is the chitta that has to be controlled by mano. Now, how this goes on is very important to understand that the struggle to exist goes on because we are thinking of a self that exists. The self, if we realize that there is no self here to exist, then there is no reason to struggle to exist. The struggling to exist is because we think there is a self to exist. So if there is no self, can there be a death? Death is also not possible if there is no self. Who is going to die? So even death, the idea of death itself, is a delusion. So if we can understand that there is no self here to worry about, the problem disappears. So this is the meaning of becoming enlightened or awakening, becoming a Buddha or becoming an Arahant. Means you are beginning to understand that there is no self here. That is the meaning of anatta. But we still have a feeling. We might understand that there is no self in an intellectual way, but still we have the feeling of self. And that feeling of self comes from the chitta, the emotional part, not from the thinking part. The thinking part may understand that there is no self, but the emotional part feels the self. And that feeling is only a sensation. It is the sensation that we are getting hold of, the feeling of self. And the feeling of self comes mainly from there are three kinds of feelings: pleasant, unpleasant and neutral. It is the neutral feeling that produces the idea of self. So this is the important thing to understand. This is why these what are called the tents here is the desire for sensual pleasure, the desire to exist, and the desire which is not really a desire, is ignorance, not knowing anything, the delusion of self, the thought I am. And the thought I am comes from the thought mine. Because we become aware of a subjective experience and an objective experience. So the subjective experience we call mine, and the objective experience we regard as something outside. Okay, so do you have any questions to ask about this? So it's mainly trying to understand the meaning of this. Paticca Samuppada. It's all happening due to the presence of the necessary conditions. There is no person doing anything here. That's the important thing to understand. Yeah?
Bhante, we have questions. You mentioned that it is the neutral feeling that produces the self. Can you explain further? The neutral feeling produces the self.
There is nothing for me to explain. You only have to
Meditate.
look at yourself. That's all. Why do I think there is a self here? You begin to see that it's not a thinking, it is a feeling. The self that you are aware of is a feeling. And it is the feeling that makes you think there is a self. That's the important thing. You only have to become aware of that feeling. Now this is why you only have to relax. When you relax your body, the feelings gradually begin to disappear. It is the tension in the body that produces the feeling. When the body becomes relaxed, that feeling also begins to disappear. It's only when that feeling disappears that you begin to realize that this feeling of self is really just a feeling. This is why the importance of relaxing the body. The relaxing the body and calming the mind is very important. And also, all the activities that you do, every time you do anything, you begin to feel the self. The self is doing it. And that feeling of self. So that is why you have to stop all activities and relax and observe the breathing. Not to see the breathing as something that you do. You have to see the breathing as something that is automatically happening. You have to depersonalize the breathing. So that is the important thing here. Not to be concentrating on the breathing, but to be aware of the breathing as something that is happening. Not something that you do. Whether you pull the breath in or push the breath out, you don't have to do that. It automatically goes in and goes out. Yeah?
Bhante, just one question or clarification. At the end of the day, the breathing itself just remain an activity without a self.
What?
The breathing remain an activity with no self in existence.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you.
This is why you have to become aware of the breathing. So it's not concentrating on the breathing, it is just being aware of the breathing as it comes in and as it goes out. As an impersonal process.
Bhante, I just have a suggestion. For the benefit of the new people, would it be nice for you to explain the difference between a view and a perspective, maybe? Samaditi.
What?
The difference between a view
And
a perspective.
well, view
Then for
and
the
a
new
perspective.
for the new people.
A view simply means an idea that you hold in your mind. That is a view. Perspective simply means a way of looking at things. It is like taking a picture with a camera. So the angle from which you take the picture or the how you hold the camera, that is the perspective. View is simply the picture that you have taken. That is the view. If you take a picture with a camera, the picture is the view. But the angle that you hold is the perspective.
Bhante, the reason why I brought this out is because the reason I brought it out is because you don't call it the right view, but you call it the harmonious perspective. So I think it's important you explain to them the perspective rather than the view.
No, the harmonious perspective simply means the way you look at things so that there is no conflict created. You don't create a conflict. Now, someone asked the Buddha, about there were these 6 teachers during the time of the Buddha. There were 6 people who were having disciples and teaching. So someone asked the Buddha, are those teachers teaching the right ideas? Now if he says they are wrong, he is taking a side, no? He is creating a conflict. So he says, I don't want to speak about any of those people. I will only speak about what I am teaching. And then he begins to talk about his thing. He doesn't talk about other people. This is why a certain person came and asked the Buddha, what is your view? What do you teach? So the Buddha said, my view is that I will not come in conflict with anyone in the world. That was his view. So it's very important to understand that the Buddha never went against other people. That is the harmonious perspective. Harmony is the opposite of conflict. That is the harmonious perspective.
Hey, Bhante, I have a question. We don't talk about non-self first. Before we achieve or before we realize the reality, if now, I will say, if now, immediately now, I die, what has passed on to, I'm not talking Nibbana first, before Nibbana, what has passed on to the future life is the yes, what has passed on, what will pass on over?
Well, this is not the first time All these days you have been asked the same question. Because, you see, the important thing is you are thinking of a self that exists. This is the problem. And you are talking about what is going to happen to me when I die. This is the problem.
Because this is insecurity of life. Everyone's scared of dying.
That's right. That insecurity of life is the problem because you are thinking of a self that is existing. It is the self that is feeling the insecurity. But that self is dying all the time. This is the problem. That is the insecurity. So the important thing is to understand that there is no self to die. This is the important thing. Understanding that there is no self here. This is why you have to understand this Paticca Samuppada is an explanation of how this idea of self comes into being. It's mainly due to personalizing. You say, this is mine, this is my body, this is my mind, this is my feeling. All the minds, it is that mind that is doing the I. The I is created by the mind. That is the important thing to understand.
Bhante, I want to ask this question another way.
Huh?
I want to ask this question in another way. You know, when we die, we are supposed to pass on to that consciousness, the energy, bhava.
Yeah.
So, in another way, I'm asking, or he is actually trying to ask, what the bhava contains. You know?
This is why we spoke about a sutra called the Maha Sankhya Sutra. There was a monk during the time of the Buddha who was thinking in the same way. When the person dies, that consciousness or whatever is going out of the body and creeping into another body. That is the meaning of reincarnation. The idea of reincarnation is that. Here the Buddha is not talking about reincarnation. There is no such thing. And the Buddha pointed out that that monk who was thinking like that is thinking in the wrong way. So there is no consciousness or anything that is coming out of the body and creeping into another body. That is not correct. Very often people explain it like that. That is the meaning of reincarnation. Because the word incarnation comes from the belief that when a person is born, God puts a soul into the body. That is called incarnation. And when a person dies, that soul comes out of the body and remains without the body. That is called the discarnate body, the discarnate soul. So, discarnation is the soul coming out of the body. And then, when we talk about rebirth, they say that is reincarnation. That soul that was without a body now enters another body. That is called reincarnation. That word incarnation is carrying that meaning. And even Buddhists begin to explain rebirth in that same way. Actually, the word rebirth is also not correct, because there is no rebirth here. There is only death of a body. The body dies. But that is not a self dying or a soul dying. There is no soul here. That is the meaning of anatta. Anatta means there is no soul. There is no self. And rebirth, the only way the rebirth is explained is simply, if you have a candle that is burning, you can light another candle with that same flame. You take that flame close to the other candle, and that other candle begins to burn. But the flame in this candle didn't go to the other candle. It is simply an activity. The flame is an activity, not an entity. The flame is an activity and not an entity. So even what you call yourself is an activity, not an entity. So one activity can start another activity. That is how the flame in one candle can start another candle. And not only one, it can keep on lighting even 100 candles with that one candle. It's simply the activity starting another activity. It's like my hand is when I shake, it is an activity, and this can be pushed by my hand shaking. So it's an activity starting another activity. That's all. So I hope you understood all this, and today we'll be stopping here, and I'll be going away for a short.
It still has to.
Huh? You have Another question.
Last question.
Still the self has not disappeared.
Sorry, Bhante. I don't know whether this is the same question for you or not. Because I don't understand, see. Nothing is passing on, the activities only. You did mention about electromagnetic field, something like this kind of thing. So for me, all these are passing on. But Bhante, you say nothing passing on.
All activities. This is the important thing.
But what about the continuity of I give an example, yeah. We read some sutta sometimes.
Continuity of an activity.
Okay, give an example in the sutta or whatever things We have examples like Buddha's past life.
Yeah.
All this is
They are all activities.
they are all activities.
Karma, marriage.
Huh?
All about karma and marriage. Is it karma and marriage passed on and determine the future birth?
No, one activity can lead to another activity. That is all that is going on. What is called karma or karma is simply an activity. So, the activity can lead to another activity. That's all.
But
You see, when you type, your finger is moving to some place and you press that, and then that leads to another thing going and touching the paper, and then so you get, these are all activities. But your hand going to the various letters can become a habit. That means whenever you think of the letter, the hand goes to that letter. So that is why after some practice, without your even thinking, the hand can go to the necessary letters and you can print the words. These are habits. So karma works like a habit. If you kill a human being, then the next time it is easier for you to kill another human being. And then that becomes a habit. And you become a murderer. So these are habits. That is how. And that habit that can lead to other habits, and that is how karma works.
But isn't it carried on to future life?
There is nothing carried. Nothing is being carried from one place to another. It is simply one activity going and producing another activity. That is all that is happening. Even this idea of transferring merits and all kinds of things, these are not real things that is going on. Yeah.
We're wasting our time all the time.
Huh?
So we have been wasting our time and money.
No, the important thing is, really then say, your mother or father dies, you're giving some money to someone is not going to help much. The real thing is, if you live a good life, and then your mother is living somewhere and sees that you are living a good life, the mother will have some good ideas in the head. Oh, my son is doing this. And that is how you can help your mother really. So that your good behavior can help another person who is dead but is able to see that there is only some kind of rebirth. There are some people who are reborn as what are called pretas. They are able to see you. And then if you live a good life, they can see you. And that way, they can gain from what you are doing. Otherwise, there is nothing being transferred from here like money or something. It's not a thing like that. You can't send money to the other world. That's not what it is.